So during your stand up, you talk about your mental health and how you go to therapy.
Uh-huh.
How was that conversation talking to your parents that came from a different generation of not really talking much about mental health?
Um, I think okay, so I don't know if my father remembers this, and I don't know if my mom definitely don't know this. I don't think she does. I don't think my grandma remembers this, but there's this once when I was in, I would say around fifth grade to seventh grade, around that time. I remember when we're on a family trip and at a motel, and I was looking out the window, and I was really sad and depressed then too. But I was stressed. I was really stressed out. I didn't know how to do it. And the reason why I was really sad and depressed is because I didn't move in with mom and dad until fifth grade, you know? So I lived with my grandparents and I had bad grades all my life. So I know I don't look like a person that would have bad grades, but I had terrible grades. And in Taiwan, they spank you. And also, I was a pretty naughty kid, so I brought it upon myself. And I was having a great time, actually. I didn't mind getting spanked at all. Like the teachers, there's one time the teachers hit me so hard that she broke her cane on my leg, and she had to apologize because she made like a boil on my leg from hitting me like so many times and broke it. But then I got spanked by my uncle that night because so they don't just go, oh, they hit you again because you fucked up, you know. Um, so coming from that, it's not the spanking that affected me because there's other troublemakers that I would they're my friends because we just want to have a goofy good time, and so I never cared about a spanking. What matters most is that when you go home and the energy, because now you're away from your troublemaker friends. Now you're away from like recess and like, because those are little moments throughout the day that is like, it makes it fun. Nothing else was fun to me, and I didn't like school, yeah, and all of those things. But what was the worst thing is that going home, um, my it wasn't the fact that my parents spanked me too. That I didn't mind either. Is the fact that I don't get to go. I can't escape it. I can't escape the bad energy. I feel like kids, it doesn't matter in what culture, what country, the energy of parents is everything. Like you go home, there's a certain like feeling that you feel right when you even approaching the house. You feel the darkness looming. So it's like every time I'm even going home, I'm just like, man, I don't want to. This is the worst. And at the time, you don't even know how to express that because that's just the normal thing to do. You just go home, but you just have this like really heavy feeling, like why am I like I don't want it, like how this feels bad. But at the time, you don't even think about it. You don't think like, oh, this feels bad. You just go, oh, this is part of it. But it's like wearing on you. But nobody ever addresses it. Nobody talks about it. It wasn't a thing, but we all feel it. That's just part of life. So, and it wasn't like we talk about it like, oh, yesterday I didn't want to go home because my father was beating me up. You don't say that because everybody was getting it. So it's like it's just normal. And coming from that, because obviously, and I totally understand why parents wouldn't talk about mental health, is because their generation is they had their parents was in at war. So if you're at war, you will be even more traumatized when you go home, and you don't even know, there's no communication. There's no way there's communication when your parents is at when your father is at war and your mom is just trying to keep the family together. So from that, now our generation's parents, they're not great at communicating either, and they're just doing their best as well. So coming from that, it's just hard to tell your parents that you're anything mentally. So I still wanted to go back to addressing the hotel room thing. I was in a hotel motel room, and we're on a family trip, and uh, I looked out the window and I was like, man, sometimes I want to jump, like to my grandma, and I was like, she's like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, yeah, sometimes I'm just like, man, it would have been good just ended like. This was like in 5th grade, 7th grade. I was like, what if it just ended? Like everything would just go away. Kablow. You know? And then my girl was like, what are you even saying? And then I was like, yeah, like sometimes, I just want to kill myself. Right? And then, and I meant it. And she knew I meant it because she's like, what are you saying, Jason? Like she looked a little concerned. I remember that. And then my dad came back to the hotel. Excuse me. My dad came back to the hotel, and my grandma's a snitch, by the way. She tells my parents everything. So she just in front of me, like maybe like 5-6 feet away, and she told my dad, like whispers something. She told him like I could half hear it, and my dad immediately was like, he's not brave enough. like in Mandarin, he said that. And like, so off of that, obviously over time, and this is like, 20 some odd years ago. And obviously over time, he's a little more understanding now and a little more chill now than before. But it is difficult to tell your parents that, because mental health, like everybody knows, it isn't something that you could see. It's like if you break your leg, then it's like, yeah, everybody sees it and everybody's like, oh, you okay? Your leg's broken. But then nobody sees what's inside of your head. So even if you're decapitated, it's a new word. English language is the very interesting and vicarious language. Decapitated. Um, Even if you're decapitated in the brain, nobody sees it. So nobody would be concerned. So even if you're like really, really struggling mentally, if you don't have the tools or capability to express yourself to others, which is another skill, like a lot of people I mean, everywhere in the world, but especially in the Asian culture, everybody was taught to do what they're told. Nobody was asked or taught to critical think. I remember it was in Miramar College in San Diego. It was a English class, and that was the first time ever that I even learned the term critical thinking, and I didn't know what that was. Every every class, the teacher, Mr. Arancibia, he would talk about critical thinking every class, but I never learned it until maybe 5 years ago, and I was in college, like 10 odd years ago. But I never, even when he was trying to explain what critical thinking is, that wasn't a term that was. I couldn't grasp it. Maybe it was the weed or the ecstasy. Maybe it was the drinking. I don't know, but or maybe it was just wasn't paying full attention. Maybe it was all of them combined that I didn't grasp it because the way the Asian culture is and the way I grew up, for not everybody but in general, is that you just do what you're told always and don't think for yourself. Don't ask questions. I mean, even when teacher says anybody has any questions, they don't mean it. Because I mean, I don't know if you guys noticed, but in Asia, the class sizes are a lot bigger. So when I was in like 1st grade, there was like 60 people in the class, and that was like a normal amount of people. Yeah, so teachers, everybody has a question, and now is like, so you just go study on your own and figure it out later in the textbooks. So never taught to critical think. So being in that environment, having the parents growing up that way, even in a more intense generation, that being a part of it, and even and also I would like to say that I'm more sensitive mentally, or just more sensitive in energy and in feelings, and more introspective than some others. And so, with all of those things combined, those and probably even other things that, so it is a difficult thing to speak to your parents about it, because in the beginning they would think that, why would you need it? Like, we are, 50, 60, 70 years old. We didn't take one session. Like, why would you need it? But it's, I think, is the most important. I mean, every part of your health is important, but mental, like, without mental, you have nothing. Without a leg, you could still go places. Without two legs, you could still go places. It'll be very difficult. But sorry, I'm not supposed to laugh, but sorry for the legless people out there. Um, actually, I actually followed. This is a sidebar, but I followed this veteran. I forgot his name, but he inspired me so much because I think he only has one leg and like one arm, and that, and he was a veteran, and that to me is, and he's doing amazing things. He's giving speeches. He's like teaching classes. I don't know, just things like that. Like, is so, and having a, this is the most important thing, having a positive outlook, because he's seen the worst of humanity, and that took a huge toll on him physically and mentally, and then be able to still be positive and give more of himself to others. That is incredible, because we complain about weather. I live in LA. Do you know how many people complain about weather if it goes like under 60? They're like, oh my gosh, it's so fucking cold today. We complain, or I do. I complain if water's too cold too. I'm like, this is too many ice cubes. It's hurting my teeth. And this guy has no leg and no arm, and he's inspiring other people. So the utmost respect and love to everybody in general, but also to the people that has a difficult life and still could persevere. So I just want to preface that. And back to what I was saying about being if you don't have any legs, or any, like, blind, or whatever the thing, the disability might be, you could still go on technically, but without mental, you can't have the comprehension or skills. You know what I mean? So, and a lot of it is nature, and also a lot of it is nurture. Like, for example, when we're talking about conversating and expressing your feelings, going back to the culture, nobody was taught to do that, and it was shunned upon. It was shamed that if you would express your feelings in the Western culture as well, but extremely, especially in the Asian culture. So if you are, you know, if you were taught never to think for yourself and just do what you're told your whole life, yeah, I don't blame my parents if it's hard for them to, or anyone to not be able to express themselves, because it does take effort and practice to even know how to express yourself precisely enough so that other people could understand you. And everybody has their own way of thinking already, and everybody has uh, their own kind of understanding. So to be able to have a lot of people understand how you feel is already the first hurdle that people have to cross. And that is already so hard. And the second thing is, for people who are shamed to express themselves for so long, to now, even if you do know how to express yourself, you need to now be courageous enough to express your feelings and be vulnerable. Because if you say it and people, whatever trauma that you may have, people would, either shame you, make fun of you. That is the thing. But I'm really glad that nowadays people are more accepting. Most people. I mean, I'm sure there's still people who are more traditional that would be like, you don't need that. Just, many of us don't even have the opportunity or resources to see a therapist. And I totally understand that. I completely understand. But that's why I really think that mental health is something that should be accessible and free, especially in America. I mean, some countries, they're still struggling with water, so we're already lucky enough that we have the resources to be seen, mentally. Uh, but yeah, but I think also this is another thing, like talking to your parents about your mental health. It's just sometimes they're, I don't know if stuck in their ways is the best way to describe their um, perspective and uh, their mental state, but uh, I think at some point they also accepted who they are, their past and their present, and they're trying to enjoy their life too. And I think I don't know. I think that has to do with a lot of personality and the way you were taught as well. Some people, even if they get older, they still um, seek to interact with the younger generation because they want to stay relevant. They want to stay. I don't know how to express it, but maybe linear in life because they still want to learn the new and be know like how are the younger generation, what are they talking about, like what's new and how are they communicating. But I feel like for a lot of older adults, they just want to have a good time, they just want to accept who they are and enjoy life as well. And I think because, and also they only have so much energy to spend during the day already. They work their whole lives, so they want to take it a little more easy. They don't want to use any more mental or physical energy to do anything that's unnecessary. So um, because of those reasons, it's still difficult to have that conversation and have the parents to be like, oh yeah, let me learn what, like this whole mental, how you feel, like how are people feeling these days, like what is the introspectiveness of things. um uh because at the end of the days, they still have to work, they still have to make a living if they're not retired yet. um so yeah, so that's another difficult part because they have their lives, too, and it does take a lot of energy. But I still think not necessary, but I think it's a good thing to bring up, um, like not to have a conversation, but at least to express to your parents that hey, this is a thing. So because at the very least, you have practiced to express yourself. You communicated with your parents, who is your family, and or your friends. It doesn't matter who, the people that you care about. You still expressed it, and somebody knows how you feel. So that they could they could also they could just know. People you care about. You should express that. Uh, because I'm sure if they really care about you, they would like to know whether or not they would feel like that's a big thing or not. I just think it's just good to tell people how you feel because we're human beings and we like in nature we like to we just interact with each other. We're social animals is what I'm trying to say. So um yeah, so I think it's just good to express yourself then. um yeah, but
So then, when you had your conversation with your parents about going to therapy, what was their reaction? How did they take it?
I don't think I don't think that they never asked me any questions, and I did tell them that I was doing therapy, and I joke around about it in my set, in my stand up shows. But I think in their mind, for the longest time, now I think they feel a little differently, but for the longest time, they were like, oh my God, like, why would you need it? Like, this is even like a year or two ago. And I would tell them, like, I'm very depressed. Like, it's making me very anxious because I wasn't. Okay. And for the listeners out there, I wanted to say this. I was the most anxious person. Like, I didn't sleep well. None of the nights I slept well. And I was eating a lot of sugar and I was jerking off all the time. sorry, sorry. And that's another issue that we could delve into next time. But jerking off, all of it is just to soothe me because like those are the things that release endorphins or serotonin or whatever. But I was doing all. I was eating sugar, doing that, and I was working out. And I was also smoking cigarettes, and I was taking edibles at night. Um, and I was drinking. Like I was drinking actually a lot, but it didn't seem like it because every night I'll be performing at bars and then I'll have a beer. I'll have like 2 shots here and there. And that's every night. But I'd never get drunk, but I'll just take one just to ease. But think about it. If you do it 2 every night for 7 days, that's 14 drinks. That's already way too many. Like they say you're supposed to have 5 a week. I mean, some people have 14 drinks every other day, So, but I'm just saying it's not healthy to do that. So I was doing that consistently for like 2, 3, 4 years when I first started stand up, and yeah. So my parents didn't really care about it. And he's like, "Why do you need it? Like you're fine, Like they're like, you have a place to stay. We support you." And so it's like, and then I have a wife, so it's like, what else do you need? But I don't think, that's the thing. Like, so this is another thing I wanted to talk about before I finish talking about this thing is that just because you look okay and then you have the resources doesn't mean your mental cannot be the most messed up. Like that's why a lot of people in Silicon Valley, there's this city, I forgot what it's called, but it has the highest suicide rates in one city in the entire country. But though they also had the highest paying jobs is the thing. Did you know that? Yeah. So you could Google it after. Somewhere in Silicon Valley, they have the highest suicide rates in the United States. I could be wrong, but that's what I read at one point. And then it's just because there's so much pressure and the work environment isn't the best for the mental health. And I'm not speaking as if like, oh man, like if you're okay financially or if you have an apartment, you have, you know, feel bad for the people. It's like, no, it's like, yeah, the people who are the least fortunate are the ones that struggles most because not only they don't have the resources for, overcoming mental challenges, they don't even have enough resources for the daily need, like human needs, like water and food and shelter. They're for sure the number ones that's struggling the most. And but that doesn't cancel out the fact that the people who are more fortunate than the people that doesn't have shelter, like just because you have a place to stay, food and water, that doesn't mean that your mental health, like why? It's like shit happens. It's just like earlier when I talked about a broken leg. It's like you could be, Joe Biden. You could be the president, still fall off a bike and break your leg, is my point. You could be Trump and go upstairs or fall a couple stairs or fall a couple times. It doesn't matter how powerful, how rich you are. You could still have a broken mind, is the thing. So yeah, so the how they react to it is that they didn't. So my parents was just like kind of like, you have everything. You have a shelter, food, and water, and you have a wife. So what's the it's like yeah, but none of those things are guaranteed. That's number one. And number two, it doesn't matter wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, if you have a partner, is still work. It's not like, and just because you have, the divorce rate is over 50%. That's number one. And in the Asian culture is way less, is because they have to save face. They can't let people know that their relationship is falling apart. They have to show that they're perfect. So that's even more toxic than to have a divorce and grow. Um, but anyways, yeah. So in the beginning, they were really kind of like not caring, because they kind of like, why would you? I get the feeling, that they're kind of like just, oh, you don't really need it. Like, why would you waste money? Like, and be stronger, But that wasn't the right approach. Um, but I think over years of communicating, and by the way, I just started therapy like 2 years ago, but I always expressed to them that I wasn't mentally well. Oh, this is the point that I wanted for the listeners out there, that I want to tell the listeners that if you are struggling with anxiousness, stress, and insomnia, please try this because it helped me tremendously. I started doing the intermittent diet, and I started to eat less sugar. It's the hardest thing because I have a very addictive personality my whole life. I mean, I do stand up for a living, so it's like I'm addicted to the rush. So I have an extremely addictive personality. Intermittent diet helped me the most, physically, mentally, the most, because start there. So you could basically eat whatever you want within the 8 hour period. Start there, and then you cut back to 7, cut back to 6. But if you do that for just to set the goal for 30 days, you will see a difference. And if you could do 30, please do 3 months, do 6 months. I started to sleep way. I tried everything. I tried melatonin. I tried edibles. I tried alcohol every night and see if I could sleep better. None of them helped. But doing the intermittent diet helped everything. I slept better. I felt better. When I woke up, I wasn't feeling like because sometimes I get really tight in my neck and my shoulders because I'm so anxious, and I just sometimes it's so anxious that it becomes physical, really physical. Like sometimes there's so many times that I get panic attacks in a car. Like I have to ask uh, Carrie to pull over, just so that I could get out and breathe. Or I was in the subway with my friend Opie. Opie, he's a great comic. Opie and me, Alagbaju. He's gonna be super famous. He's working on a show right now. But I was with him, and I was so anxious that I was like getting a panic attack, too. And I was getting that all the time. But I really appreciate and really grateful that hasn't happened recently. Um, doesn't mean that it won't, but and I was on the planes, and I get really stressed out on planes because of turbulence. I'm a scared cat. Uh, and they always ask you, like, are you willing to help? I'll tell you yes, but it's like definitely not. Like, I'm gonna live first. You know what I mean? But anyways, um, intermittent diet is everything, because from there, and you could drink water, but just in 8 hour period, you could eat whatever you want to, as much as you want to, but only within the 8 hour period. So for example, you could start at 12 noon, and that's your first meal. But by 8, at 8 p.m., that's the last thing you eat, and you need nothing else. So you can either start earlier from 1 to 7, or from 11 to 7, or from like 10 to 6. Just an 8 hour time frame. That's the only time you get to eat. It helped me so much. That, and then I started stretching, which is I mean, we worry about that later, but stretching helps everything too, especially the psoas muscle, like the crotch, the growing muscle. Oh man, that I feel like that's where the anxiousness is. I think feel like anxiousness was just stored in my crotch muscle, the psoas muscle, because I was stretched like the ballet stretch. I don't know what the ballet stretch, but it's basically like a lunge, and then you just hold it there and you breathe deep into your core, breathe out. I've been doing that for like 4 years now, and that stretch, every time I stretch, I feel so good. Like, yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to give that information out there for people that might want to try it because it really helped me tremendously. And yeah. So, but now, my parents, I think that they care about my health more because I expressed to them that there are a lot of the times I actually called the suicide hotline several times. And I told my therapist that, and I just thought it was normal to think about killing yourself every single day, and it's not. And I, because it just feels like it's easier, and a lot of the times, a lot of like, and I still think about this. I'm like, am I a strong enough person? Because sometimes I feel like I'm too weak to live, and I do think that because I a lot of the times if I want to give up on life, I just feel like what kind of weak person would have that thought, to give up on life, you know? And sometimes when I'm working out and it's too painful, I'm like, what? Just don't do it. It's fine. But I think recently, I don't think the strength is in like, because sometimes people would be like, oh, honor, death before honor. Death before honor. Like a lot of fighters would say that. Death before honor. And they want to honor their family, their name, their title, their legacy, their skills. And I 100% respect that. 100%. That's so hard. But I think even deeper, even a deeper motivation to live is not, for some it's definitely honor, but I think for others and for myself, I think the motivation to live isn't really that, for me at least, because it's embracing all emotions and all things of life. Because I always have this dream, this reoccurring dream when I was younger, that I would die and then I just see my body and I just go up, really cheesy and really generic, you know, just upwards. And then I'll look at myself and feel nothing. But one thing, feel disappointment and emptiness. Because I feel like if you can't, I think it's a privilege to feel not just happiness, but it's also a privilege to feel sadness and anger. Because without, it's like water. You wouldn't know something is hot if you don't know what cold is. If your whole life all you know is hot, that would just be water. That would just be that. Like you wouldn't have a contrast. So you can't be extremely happy if you've never been extremely sad. Like, so what I mean is that, I don't know if that makes sense. Like if you can't, like if you already have something, you feel nothing. Like for example, that's why sometimes I'm really sympathetic for kids who are born into the super wealthy, like the billionaires, because they have everything, and people are like, oh yeah, they have everything. Like why are they're so lucky? They have nothing to complain about. It's like, no, they started at the top. Like imagine you people are climbing Everest and you're at the top already. You know that the moment that people make it to the mountaintop and they cry, they break down, they go on their knees, or like they just have this euphoric, surreal experience. The people who are born at the top don't get to have that because they're at the top. They don't know what it's like to struggle. They don't know what it's like to break something. They don't know what it's like to climb and then fall repeatedly, have people doubt you, have people shame you, be hurt, be weak, and still have to move forward to the top. So you will only be able to feel happiness and accomplishment if you felt despair, if you felt failure, if you felt, you know, depression. Then when you come out of that, you will have relief and you would have that feeling of being the mountaintop. So what I'm saying is that giving that reference back to what I was saying about mental health, and being being the motivation of why to live is so that we can enjoy the full spectrum of emotions in life, even at the most desperate and moments, like when you're in so much pain you just want to quit and lay down and die. I think at that moment, this is David Goggins, by the way. David Goggins, this is what he said. He's like, well, what if? For him, it's like, what if you can get out of this? How crazy would that be? Is that what if you could do it? How crazy would you feel that you could get out of that? And to me, is the similar thing, if not the same. The feeling of like, yeah, what if I get out of it? Because if you die right there, you're not gonna. Nobody knows what happens, but you don't get to have the feeling of like, oh, you did something. You kind of just died, you know. And I done many things where I quit many times. So I try not to do that, and that's something that I still need to work on and will want to continue to work on, because I think it would be really nice to see myself and others that in the moments that they're that they want to quit or desperate, but come out of that, to see myself do that and to see others do that. I think that's why we watch movies, because we know what it's like to be beaten down, metaphorically speaking, but we always want the underdog to win, because coming out of that is, we all know how hard it is. So yeah, so I just want to also say that about, if you are struggling, nobody can tell you how to do it, and nobody really can help you. But I was there 100%, and this is funny, but the therapists, or when you call the suicide hotline, they always ask you, hey, do you have anything that you could harm yourself with? And I always told them no, because if you say yes, I don't want you to trip out, and now you call the police, and now I'm arrested and thrown into the mental health facility. I'm not stupid. I'm gonna tell you the truth. Do I have something to harm myself with? Of course. Who doesn't? There's kitchen knives. There's ropes. There's buildings everywhere. Not to mention guns. Okay? Everybody does. What kind of I know obviously there is a protocol and liability to ask, but yeah, I always told them no. But yeah, I definitely think that it takes a lot of work. That's the thing. It takes a lot of work to start practicing to rewire your brain in a way, like, for example, if your brain is always like, this is depression, A to B, depression way, right? It's really hard to wire and reroute the road to be like A to C instead of B. And it's really hard because it's like you're so used to this path. Like, oh, depression, like if something happens, you go, yep, I'm sad. So it's really hard to do that, but it's necessary if you want to enjoy the full spectrum of life and not just the depression part and also happiness part. Yeah, so I wanted to end this episode or this conversation, one-way conversation, but I would still love to, hear your stories in the comments or email us about your experiences. And yeah, but I it's so hard to give advice. I'm not the, I only could share my story because nobody could give me advice and um, change my mind, especially at a time where you're really depressed. So I'm definitely not gonna do that. Um, but I do want to say that it's really enjoyable to try. It's it's worth it to try because what if you're not sad every day? What if you could not be sad every day? Wouldn't that be something? To not be sad every day and every second? What if you're not sad for an hour today? Wouldn't that be dope? I think that's something to look forward to. So I think trying is a worthy endeavor. At least to me, it's a reminder for myself and hopefully to you. Thank you so much for your time and energy of watching the episode. And I hope that my experience resonated to some of you. Um, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.